Okay, this is the January chapter from the Wednesday Wars. On New Year's Day, the Hometown Chronicle devoted itself proudly to celebrating the many accomplishments of those young and old who had made outstanding contributions to the life and culture of our town in the past year. It wasn't a very big issue. Most of the stories were about librarians and the Kiwanis Club officers and the veterans of foreign wars and Mr. Gureshi for something, and even about my father for the enormous success of Hood and Associates and how he had been voted the Chamber of Commerce businessman of 1967. The paper printed grainy headshots of people looking distinguished, like they were already thinking about their next outstanding contribution to the life and culture of the town. There was one action shot, though, of Ariel the fairy flying high in the air across the stage of the festival theater, his legs splayed out as though he really was flying. The picture covered almost half of the front page, and the story told the whole world that the tights were yellow and that they had white feathers on the butt. No one is going to see it, said my mother. It's New Year's Day. Who looks at the newspaper on New Year's Day? It turned out that Doug Switek's brother did. Probably he looked at the picture of the front page. He saw who it was and what he was doing, and there was a flash of inspiration and ambition, which was, according to Shakespeare, what Macbeth was feeling a day or so before he murdered Duncan. Maybe for a second, Doug Switek's brother thought that, since I had told him about Pied Ninny, he shouldn't do anything about what his inspiration and ambition were telling him to do. But probably only for a second. In the end, Doug's in the end he was Doug Switek's brother, and he couldn't help himself. It's like there's a Doug Switek's brother gene that switches on too. Some of what happened after that we found out from Doug Switek, who came back to Camellia Junior High with a black eye, which is not how you're supposed to come back to school after the happy holidays. The shiner had been a whole lot bigger and blacker a couple of days earlier, he said, but it was still pretty impressive. It's hard to believe that parts of you can turn green and purple at the same time, but they can. At first, he wouldn't tell anyone what happened, not even when Danny threatened to give him a matching set of black, green, and purple eyes. But when I promised him one of my free cream puffs from Goldman's Best Bakery, he gave in. People will do just about anything for one of Mr. Goldman's cream puffs, I guess. So, here's what happened. It was still early in the morning when his brother found the newspaper. Doug told us, since it was the day after people had stayed up to watch the New Year's ball drop in Times Square, his brother figured everyone was sleeping late. He put on his coat, went out into the neighborhood, and stole the front page of the Hometown Chronicle from every stoop he could find. And there were plenty. Then he came back home, carried them up to his lair, and cut out the Ariel the fairy picture from each one, careful to include the headline, which was this: Hauling Hood as Ariel the fairy soars on stage to rescue his potent master. This isn't at all what was happening in the play, but that was the least thing to fuss about. After he finished cutting out the pictures, he took them all to the basement and found the bright yellow oil paint left over from a go-kart that he had made to run kids down with. Then he went to get Doug, probably because he didn't know how to paint inside the lines. Doug wouldn't tell us what he said when he saw the pictures and the can of yellow paint. All I know is that he wouldn't help and so took a black eye. His brother probably promised a whole lot more if he said anything about the pictures or the black eye. Then he found a brush and got to work himself. Whatever it means to be a friend, taking a black eye for someone has to be in it. The rest of what happened I figured out myself. On the morning that school started again, Doug Switek's brother got to Camellia Junior High early. This should have warned somebody. If Mr. Qureshi had been in the halls trying to track down Sycorax and Caliban, he might have intercepted him, but he was probably supervising the unloading of multiple boxes of the New York State Standardized Achievement Tests, which I hadn't been preparing for because Mrs. Baker refused to give us practice exams to do during the holiday break. So Mr. Goreshi never saw him, and Doug Switek's brother was free to change his inspiration and ambition into reality. He went up and down the halls taping up pictures of Holling Hoodhood as Ariel the Fairy soaring on stage, all in bright, vivid, living, impossible to take your eyes away from color, even though a lot of it wasn't in the lines. He stuffed some of the 8th grade lockers. He taped some to the asbestos tiles on the classroom ceilings. He put them in all the stalls of the boys' restroom and in all the stalls in the girls' restroom, too. I heard that from Merrill Lee. He put them over the drinking fountains and on every classroom door and on the fire escape doors and on the walls of the stairwells. He put them on the arches over the doors of the main lobby. No one figured how he got that high without a ladder. And on the backboards of the basketball hoops in the gym. He even got them on all of the trophies in the locked glass cases by the main administrative office, and found a way to tape them to the administrative office counter so that they were the first thing you saw when you walked in. By the time he was done, every place you looked was bright yellow. It was high noon in the halls. The only thing that could have been worse was if the pictures had shown the white feathers on my butt. If they had, I would have had to leave the country. As it was, when I walked into school, I figured this would be my last day at Camillo Junior High. Maybe I'd try the Alabama Military Institute. Can you imagine what it's like to walk down the halls of your junior high and just about every single person you meet looks at you and starts to grin, and it's not because they're glad to see you? Can you imagine what it's like to walk into the boys' restroom before the 8th graders have cleared out? Can you imagine what it's like to go to gym and have Coach Quattrini, the Pied Ninny, announce that morning exercises will be stretches so that we can all practice soaring like Ariel the Fairy? No, you cannot imagine this, but let me tell you, it was a long first Wednesday back. And to top it off, Miss Baker gave me a 150-question test on the tragedy of Macbeth. Let's keep you on your toes, she said cheerfully. Sometimes I still think that she hates my guts. By the next morning, Mr. Vendelari had torn down almost all the pictures. He hadn't gotten to the ones on the trophy case yet, or the ones in the main lobby. Merrill Lee took care of the ones in the girls' restroom. Good one, old Merrill Lee. But Doug Switek's brother had an ample supply. They showed up in the halls again that Friday, on Monday in the cafeteria, on Tuesday across the stage front in the auditorium. Mr. Vendelari could hardly keep up. And when Tuesday was over and I walked home figuring that I would be free of the picture for at least the evening, my sister was waiting for me at the front door of the Perfect House, and she was holding one in her hand, complete with yellow oil paint. This, she said, was taped to my locker. So it had migrated to the high school, too. Do you want to tell me why this was taped to my locker? She said. Because someone wanted to be a jerk, I said. Someone? She looked at the picture and then held it out to me again. Who looks like a jerk in this picture, Holling? I didn't take it, I said. You're the one wearing the yellow tights. I told you this would happen. I didn't care as long as it was just you. But it's not just you now, is it? This was taped to my locker. And now I'm the one who has a baby brother who wears yellow tights. I'm not your baby brother. No, you're right. You're my brother who's all grown up and wearing yellow tights. She shoved the picture into my chest. Fix this or you die, she said. I never thought being in 7th grade would mean so many death threats. I considered my options. Cream puffs were not going to work again. The Alabama Military Institute was looking pretty good. Maybe Dad would even like the idea. That hope lasted until supper time, when my father announced that the town had decided to build a new junior high school and that Hoodhood and Associates had been invited to bid to become the architect. He looked at my sister after making the announcement. You see what being named Chamber of Commerce Businessman of 1966 can do for you? Gee, she said, I thought it was getting the nifty magnetic sign for the side of your car that was the big deal. She smiled. My father looked at me. Just swell, I said. That's right, he said, and having a kid in the school is a big plus in making a bid like this. It makes the board members think that we have a deep commitment already. And if Hood Hood and Associates gets this contract, we'll really be going places. I've been thinking of military school, I said. Dad took a sip of his coffee. I'm not sure Kowalski will even bother to put in a bid, he said.
Are you done? Okay, so you're going to want to press that button right